This is Contestants Not Appearing on Stage, a weekly game show podcast for game show enthusiasts. Episode number 1, Something Old, Something New, recorded September 25th, 2015. Alright everybody, welcome to Contestants Not Appearing on Stage, a game show podcast because why not another one? I'm Torgo, thanks for joining me, and I am not alone. Introduce yourself, co-hosts.
I am Jordan, aka Unique Perspective, and I apologize in advance, but the rest of my intro was preempted by the Pope's visit to New York. I apologize in advance.
My name is Adam. I am Road Geek Adam. And unfortunately, I don't know. I can't beat Jordan.
I'm Nick, and I am retiring as Speaker of the House.
That was a very short stint that you had there, sir.
Yeah.
So before we delve into the meat of what we're talking about today, we should probably mention what's the point of this particular podcast. And just, everyone on this loves game shows. We do, for various reasons. It could be that we just love the competitive nature of it. Some people just like the lights and the flashing sounds and all that stuff, even because sounds flash and lights don't, apparently, in my little universe. But it's just something that we're all passionate about, and we like talking about it. So we felt, why not record it for posterity? Does anybody want to add anything to that? Our little mission statement that we have, even though we don't have one set in stone.
That is a beautiful mission statement. I am shedding a single tear right now.
That's probably just from... That's because the Pope resigned. That's all.
Yes. The tear from when he resigned 2 years ago.
Exactly.
The Pope of the Republican Party.
Well, there's a joke there, but I'm not... Nope, not touching it. Nope, not at all. So the main topic that we need to address first is season premiere week for The Price is Right. It is Decades Week, or it was Decades Week. Monday's show, the season premiere, all about the 1970s. All 6 of the games premiered during the 70s. They did up the set in 1970s style. Everyone wore 1970s fashion. Tuesday was the 80s, Wednesday the 90s, Thursday the 2000s, and today's show, Fridays, brought it to present times. What did you guys think of Decades Week as a week-long premiere event as opposed to, let's say, a typical season premiere where they offer more expensive prizes than the norm?
So, I think the thing for me is that I love the 70s show, like the 80s show, like the 90s show, but then by, Thursday, it started to drag on a little bit for me as we started to approach the sort of modern era and just felt more like normal price. I think for, a novelty point of view, it works, but... Like I said, just when it drags on for a while, I don't know by the end how much the concept works as a week, so to speak.
I'm going to disagree with you. Just one statement you made, which is the idea that it dragged on. The Price is Right, I thought, did an excellent job keeping people in all week by holding off on a new game until the Friday show to make sure people tuned in all week. So I thought they did an excellent job at least trying to keep everyone watching.
I could see that. I think that a lot of the reasons why I felt it kind of petered out about midway through the week, and there's a couple different reasons. Number one, people have a lot of associations with the 70s and when the show began. Personally, I thought they could have done one of two different things for the 70s week. Either A, they had gone back even further and done it like 50s style, like Bill Cullen, The Price is Right, for the debut. I thought that would have been an interesting point of view, and they've definitely referenced the Bill Cullen era of Price on the show before. So they obviously have no shame in admitting that that is where the show truly began. So maybe if they did 50s and then 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, maybe they could have combined on a Thursday and then present day. That was a thought. The other reason why I felt it petered out is they did better on the 70s and 80s weeks because they've kind of had practice doing that. They've had a 1970s themed show before. They had that on April Fool's Day a couple of years back. And they've definitely done 80s before. I don't remember the exact reasoning, but I know they've done an 80s show not that long ago. Or maybe it's because 80s fashion was in vogue maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
I don't really have much to say on that. I mean, Torgo's right. Basically, they've had practice. And no offense, but a lot of these could have just been playing off stereotypes, which, other than George's questionable fashion sense, was pretty much avoided.
That's true. I also felt like with the 1970s, they only really tackled 1972. They really hammered in that first year or two where the show was on the air, and they didn't really reach towards 77, 78, 79 or anything like that. I mean, granted, I'm not sure how to remedy that because the first 4 games were played in order. You can't have the fifth one because it's retired. I mean, they could have thrown Clock Game in there, but c'est la vie.
I guess my thought for that is that would 70s Week be as effective if there wasn't a significant focus on the very beginning with the idea of it being the premiere and with the idea of it being a chronological order? Would it work if it threw focus to like, oh, here's a game that debuted in 1978, a few years after this all began, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I can see that point as well. Like, if you're really going to hammer it with the 70s being when the show debuted, you want to stick with stuff that is near the beginning of the show on television. I can understand where you're coming from, yeah. I also felt like the 90s and the 2000s shows kind of petered out because, well, one of the main criticisms that people lobby against The Price is Right is that it was stuck in the past for so many years. And honestly, the 90s and 2000s didn't really add that much to the show. How long did they have the same set with the turntable with the orange, the red, and the purple? How long was it just the same models, honestly? I mean, Janice was there for forever. How long was it that it was even the same games or the same styles of games? They didn't have any new gadgetry to introduce or new prizes to introduce really until the mid-2000s.
A lot of that was more on Bob than anybody else. It's not like Roger was in charge of every single decision. He just kind of went along with Bob's wishes.
Yeah, for everyone who might not know what we're talking about, Roger Dobkowitz was the producer who was really involved with Price is Right for a long time, until about, like, '08, was it?
Yeah, 2008, the end of
mean,
season 36.
Bob didn't want things that murdered animals. We stopped offering foreign cars, which kind of limits you to 3 specific car makers in this day and age, if you choose to do that. And as much as I dislike Kias showing up on a regular basis or Chevy Sparks, at least there's variety.
But the irony of that whole situation is that you have Hondas, which are manufactured in the United States, and then you have all those other brands of cars like Fords and Chevys that are usually manufactured overseas.
And at the same time, you can tell they were trying at the beginning to bring it back by doing stuff like American Honda instead of Honda. Now it's just Honda. And
I think it's because the world has become more globalized, especially since the 70s even. But with the internet, everybody is connected so much more closely through social networks, Skype, the internet, everything. Distance is no longer an issue. Like, think about studying abroad back in the 60s and 70s. That was a huge deal because you were going someplace and you didn't know much about it. Nowadays, studying abroad, why a lot of people don't even bother because all you need to do is go on YouTube and you can just type in Cyprus video and you'll see footage of it, what people are doing there, what the culture is like. A lot of the experience, xenophobia is the word I'm looking for, is disappearing. And xenophobia, I feel, is kind of disappearing everywhere because we're all becoming more closely connected. So that's why I feel like having only domestically produced cars on the show isn't as big of a deal because I don't think it's as much of a concern to people watching the show anymore. The only people that tout that something should be made in America is only when it's something that is made in America, but it's also made and in greater quantities overseas because they're taking jobs away or what have you. But other than that, I feel like it's less of a concern.
Well, I totally agree with you. I don't think we're talking about why 90s Day didn't work anymore.
Maybe not. But again, it's because what happened in the 90s on The Price is Right, other than the introduction of certain games, the removal of certain games, there's not much that they can really say was a hallmark moment other than it kept going on the air. The only thing that really happened was the dedication of the Bob Barker studio, and they addressed that.
Other than that, the 25th anniversary, but yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, you bring up something, Torgo, that I think is key, like having a specific moment to go back to, because what I thought worked about 70s and 80s were sort of the little moments, sort of showing like the first games played, the refurbished squeeze play prop, which I loved, and the first ever reveal of Plinko in the 80s. I think those moments added to the days where like the 90s and the 2000s didn't really, and to a point 2010s, but 2010s had a new game, they didn't really have that.
But
And of course, Yolanda.
True, Yolanda. But I guess here's the real question. I think most people would obviously point to the 70s as the best show of the week because they put the most effort into it. Since shows in the 90s weren't that different than shows in the 2010s, and since they didn't have to change that much because not that much had changed in 20 years, is that a detriment to the show that while striving to be accurate, they didn't have to change as much?
I don't know if it's a detriment to the show. I think it just shows that I think as much as I love Price is Right, sometimes in the modern era, while the datiness certainly is gone, because there is a lot that has not changed in 44 years, occasionally you can feel the drag like I think a couple of us did with the 90s and some of the later shows in Decades Week. Because of these similarities, because of the fact that they only throw in a major change however often, however many years.
As a follow-up question, I guess the real thing would be the most enjoyable aspect of Decades Week. Would you say that is all the cosmetic changes? And when I say cosmetic, I mean the appearances, the change of contestants row with the Goodson Thompson, Goodson Todman asterisk, the sound cues being reused, or as a follow-up to the follow-up, do you feel that it was self-indulgent to make it a whole week instead of just the first day honoring the 70s? And just continuing with the regular week for the rest of it?
Well, answer the follow-up to the follow-up. I don't think it's self-indulgent. I think it's a good idea on paper, but when you actually saw it executed, because of some of the earlier similar topics we talked about, that's where the drag came. And your initial follow-up, yeah, I guess I'd say the cosmetics were probably my favorite part. I don't necessarily think of it from a cosmetics point of view. I just see it as like a continuous homage, and I felt the homage was strongest with like the cosmetics in the 70s and the 80s, and that's why I enjoyed those two shows the most.
I could see that.
Yeah, I'm with Jordan. It's a great idea on paper, failed in execution, and then why the 44th? It just seems like a random time to do it.
That's a fair point. I think it's because they wanted to. I think it's something they've wanted to do for a while, but I don't think that they felt that they had enough games, honestly, in the 2010s in order to do it. That might be exactly what it is that this is the first year that we have 6 games for the 2010s, and even then, they kind of had to cheat a little bit.
Yeah, because they played Card Game, which was a 2000s game, I think?
No, Card Game is 1970s.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm thinking something else. But yeah, Card Game, which was 1970s, but then had a major refurbishing. Yeah, they threw that in the 2010s. It's like, oh, look at this 2010 game. It's clearly 2010. Yeah.
They did acknowledge that it was from the 70s, though. But when you've only introduced one car game for the entire decade, you kind of have to do something. I mean, what were they going to do? Play Do the Math for 2 cars? Not after that double showcase win on Tuesday.
I question though how much they budgeted in for the entire week. And I assume they left room for a double showcase winner. I don't think they immediately changed things for an entire week of planned goings on because of a DSW on the second show of the week.
Well, I honestly think that the fact that a double showcase win happened early in the season doesn't affect the budget at all. They probably account for, okay, let's say there's going to be 5 double showcase wins throughout the entire season. It's not like the budget is a week-to-week thing. It's season-wide. And I don't think that they splurged very much. I think they just, dumped a little bit into the 70s graphics, a little bit into the 80s, a little into the 90s, a little 2000s, a little to the 2010s. And honestly, I'm kind of okay with that. I feel like with other season premieres, they try and hype them up so much. Like, look at the 40th season premiere. What's the one thing everybody remembers? That would be Race Game, where she won 4 cars all at once, and that was the first game. After that, take out Race Game from the 40th season premiere. You're kind of left with a standard show, other than $40,000 Grand Game, which I don't remember going very well.
some of it was more the 40th anniversary premiere, 40th season premiere was pretty lackluster. It was the last show of the 40th season that truly made the 40th season, if you ask me.
Yeah, that was when they brought back all the old contestants.
Yeah, well, one true old contestant and the rest. Yeah.
But I guess in summation, before we move on to talk about the new pricing game, while I do agree that some of the execution for Decades Week, especially with the Wednesday and Thursday shows, might have been a little bit lacking. Like there were some minor details. There was no reason they couldn't have made the pushover box red. There was no reason that that would make your move. They couldn't have just not flashed the lights when it won. Like minor little details that honestly to me seem like a really easy fix. There's no reason why they couldn't have played different cues for different games. Again, that's something that only we care about though. The average user isn't going to really care about that. And I felt like the entire week was kind of not only a love letter to The Price is Right and its history, but a love letter to all the fans that have been watching for so long. They're like, yes, we're going to honor the tradition that we have, and we know why you fell in love with the show in the first place. And while we have to try and stay modern, we are going to, throw you guys a bone and show you we haven't forgotten about the things that you loved in the first place that made you continue to watch this show.
Before we move topics, though, I will state they did all us a favor, and they're keeping the squeeze play blueness for the rest of the season.
I think that's because looking at the new turntable color palette, I feel like squeeze play and giant like silver would clash tremendously with the new turntable.
I was also going to mention, I would love it personally if they kept the old disco ball again for Plinko. I liked it better than the personal one they have now with the wide screen revealing Plinko behind the tag, but that's a personal preference, honestly.
I mean, the disco ball looks chintzy, and I understand why they did it because that is initially what they had. You have to remember, The Price is Right is a game it's been on for so long, but you have to remember, game shows do not have that large of a budget, especially compared to other genres of television. So yes, it's a small little disco ball inside. It looks like one of those plastic trays that you launch a quarter in to give money to charity, like the Children's Miracle Network or something, because that's all they could afford at the time. So yes, and I'm happy that they treated that with authenticity, but the fact that they can go bigger is good. Like, yes, the Plinko sign and all that, whatever, okay. But I feel like that it was a nice one-off to have the Plinko disco ball, because they only did it, it was the premiere of that game back in '83, and then they immediately moved away from it. Regardless, I feel like there's nothing really wrong with the Plinko introduction now. It's quicker, and with all the commercials that they have to have on the show now, I have no problem with them just tossing the Plinko ball back in the garbage with Penny Ante.
Rest in peace, Penny Ante forever.
But speaking of Penny Ante, it lives, nice segue, it lives in some sort of extent in the new pricing game, which was the 6th pricing game on Fridays. Today's show.
Here's our new game. It's called Vendo Price. Come over here, Rick. I'm going to show you how this game works.
Which, oddly enough, was probably the most retro-looking prop of the entire week.
I have mixed thoughts on Vendo Price. Before I start rambling, would anyone like to say what they think of the game, aesthetically, gameplay-wise?
I have to agree with you. I was very mixed watching it before we started this. I mean, the game moves slower than it really should. The graphics move slower than they should. Where it goes, when it reveals the prices, it's like it takes it a second to actually reveal, and then another second for them to ding and accept it. It just takes too long there. Then,
I think part of that might be so people at home can do the math in their head as they're watching. So they can kind of figure it out by the time the result shows.
At the same time, you also would appreciate if they had just kept the same screen and, if they're going to do that, just move the price onto the screen. Don't do that entire flipping brigade that they did at the middle of the screen. At least personally.
And I guess for those who didn't see the game, should we explain how the game works?
Vendo Price is an old school vending machine, not the black drop like you put in the quarter and you type in like B6 and then like potato chips come down. It doesn't look like that. It's the old school one. It has like a gate that opens from the side and there's 3 shelves. There's different amounts of different grocery products on each shelf. They have 3 grocery products. The top shelf is blue and that has the least expensive of the 3 grocery items on there. The middle shelf is green, and that has the moderately priced grocery product. The bottom shelf is orange, and that has the most expensive. But they have different denominations of each item on the shelf. Today's playing had 8 of the smaller priced item. In today's instance, it was V8 Splash. 6 of the medium priced grocery item, which was the Lancaster chewables, the candies, and 3 of the most expensive, which were bags of Ore-Ida French fries. And what they had to do, or the contestant had to look at each of the 3 shelves and determine which of the 3 shelves was the most expensive, be it the 8 drinks, the 6 bags of candy, or the 3 bags of French fries. And if she picked correctly, she would win the prize, which was a $5,000 package of stuff for a year. I will say this. I love the execution of the game in terms of a gameplay standpoint. I love that they have somehow created a new grocery product game that only has 3 grocery items, so there's not as much copy as the grocery games which with more items, such as It's in the Bag or Time is Money or what have you. I think 3 grocery items is actually the least out of any game currently in the rotation.
Let 'em roll.
Let 'em
Has
roll
3
only
as
has
well.
3, but Let 'em roll has enough physical gameplay afterwards. But still, the fact that it only has 3 is pretty impressive because they could have easily done the same idea with 4 or 5 or what have you. They could have done it with 2, but I felt like that would have been a little short, a little too easy. You had to make 3, so there's a little bit of choices there. I think the Vendo Price as a whole is a love letter to the old school fans. Not only because of the penny ante sound, which I'll get to in a moment, believe me, but the fact that it's a physical prop with a physical moving door. A lot of the games now have computer generated imagery and special effects, and the Plinko introduction now has the $50,000 on the screen and has like graphics as segueing between anything. You don't get that with Vendo Price. You just have a physical prop that moves on its own. There's a prop that the contestant has to hold, which is a quarter. Everyone loves when the contestant gets to hold something in like Balance Game or Plinko or 10 Chances with the marker or anything like that. So it's introducing more physically tangible aspects to the show. And I like that. I like the color scheme. I feel like, yes, it's loud, but the set is really loud right now. So I feel like it works. It doesn't clash too horribly with the color palette they've chosen for the turntable. I feel like it's good because it's not necessarily a game that can just be played for a certain type of prize. They can play it for a car. They can play it for a trip. They can play it for a cash value of prizes like they did today. It can be played for pretty much anything. Whereas the other games that they've been producing, Time is Money, only can be played for $20,000. The card game Revival only can be played for a vehicle. Do the Math can only be played for 2 different prizes and some cash. So I felt like the malleability of what they can offer is really neat and something that they haven't done in a while. Vendo Price to me feels like an old school game because of its ability to just kind of shift around and serve different purposes on the show. It needs to be a quick card game and we don't want to play that's too much. Throw in Vendo Price and it serves just the same purpose. That being said, I really do not like the penny ante sound effect in this game. It serves no purpose. I feel like it's just pandering to people who understand what that is, or they just ran out of sound effects and were like, hey, what's this? We haven't used it in a while. Because the penny ante sound effect evokes what the original thing was. I know it's the old Trivia Trap sound effect. No, Trivia Trap is Pathfinder. It's from some other game show whose name escapes me.
The Joker's
right now.
Wild.
The Joker's Wild. It represents something going up. Joker's Wild, it was pulling a lever and something went up on the board. In Penny Ante, you push the button and something went up on the board. Here, it's 2 numbers twisting around in a circle in a fancy multiplication problem. I feel like it's not the proper effect to use for what they're wanting to do. There's no reason to have the penny ante sound effect there. The ding serves that purpose alone.
Actually, I have a wacko theory. If you want to hear it.
Sure, go for it.
If you could move that sound effect to the opening of the vending machine, where it would at least feel the same way as something moving.
I feel like that the sound effect actually is too quick in order to do that, because it actually takes a little bit of time to get that gate to open.
I'm not as much of a sound cue geek as some Price is Right fans out there, so So I mean, I don't think about that like as much. But I guess my question is that realistically, if you open or like slide a vending machine, would it make a noise similar to the old penny any sound effect?
No,
Is
not
that
at
even
all.
realistic?
No.
I guess the thing is, like, take away the fact that it's from an old beloved pricing game, Penny Ante sound effect. Take its history away and just the sound effect. It's not appropriate for what they're using it for. I didn't think that that was the right choice. I was happy because I heard the Penny Ante sound effect, something we haven't heard on the show in almost a decade. But then I thought about it. I'm like, wait, this is totally the wrong time to use this.
I guess my thing is that it's like the way I kind of viewed vendor prices, I didn't necessarily let the queue wasn't necessarily like a big factor in determining whether I liked vendor price, which I really do by the way.
Oh,
Maybe
I just some of the execution and some of the flair that they've given. It's mostly the sound effects or what I don't like. I don't like that Drew just gives a coin and like, why isn't that a Drew dollar? Why isn't it a coin worth the amount of the most expensive value? You know?
I mean, is the story always going to be that that he just let you buy lunch with his money, like they said on the game?
That was kind of weak, honestly. Like, oh, you know Drew Carey, so I'm gonna buy you lunch. That's how Hollywood works, apparently.
I could make a comment, but I won't. But yes.
Take away the, for lack of a better term, the window dressing. I think it's a very solid game. It's quick. It's easy to understand from a viewing point. Other people have said with Time is Money, the most recently released new game. The problem with Time is Money is you can't follow what's going on as they're frantically moving prizes among the shelves. You know, you can't really see what's going on. Vendo Price, everything is stationary. It is one choice that needs to be made. I feel like the timing on the reveal is perfect because, let's face it, some people don't have the multiplication skills necessary. And it's like the same pacing as a reveal on like Bullseye or Grocery Game or something like that, where multiplication is involved. I just really like it because it serves a niche. It evokes minor feelings of other pricing games, but I feel like it feels fresh enough where it definitely warrants a place in the rotation.
And I don't think we've ever had, and someone can interject around, I can't think of any time we've ever had like a most expensive grocery project, except for maybe high-low, but never quite to this extent of finding like the single most expensive, which I like as a mechanic.
I like it too because they have never done it before. High-low is something where it's just pick the 3 most expensive items. We're not dealing with grocery products. We are dealing with series of grocery products, multiple quantities of grocery products, which apart from a Grocery Game, honestly, and like Bullseye, which there's just kind of a theoretical, hypothetical, oh yeah, I'm going to buy 4 of these even though there's just 1 there. No, there's actually 8 juices. There's actually 6 bags of candy. And I don't think we've ever seen that before. And the only time we've seen multiple instances of a grocery product is something like It's in the Bag, where they have another copy inside the bag, or Time is Money, where for the reveal they have a second copy of like potato chips in the turnstile where they reveal the actual prices.
Yeah, and like I said, like I mentioned, because I'm sort of a math guy, I like the idea of including multiplication. I wonder whether some of the audience will get confused by the idea, or a contestant will be like, oh, I'm going to pick the bottom product because it's the most expensive. Do you think it's... Let me ask this. Do you think it's explained well enough for that to be prevented one day?
Here's another question which I was thinking about before we started recording. Would you like the game more if they had to pick the shelf that was the cheapest? Because theoretically, if you're putting in a coin, you can only afford 1 shelf. Wouldn't you pick the one that was the cheapest?
Because I'm someone who only tends to look at the story of the game a little bit, it honestly doesn't bother me too much whether it's most or least. It would only be weird if it's like, okay, pick the middle.
Yeah, that would be ridiculous. There's no reason to. Adam and Nick, do you have anything to add about Vendo Price?
I don't know. I'm still mixed on the game. I love vending machines, but I just don't know if this is truly paying tribute in the way I kind of expected. I'm like, when I first started the game, I'm picturing
What do you want,
this...
the Vending Machine Hall of Fame to bestow it with a medal or something?
That's not what I mean. I was picturing some kind of like, I don't want to say slot machine, but something similar to like 3 displays going up and down, not side to side. Is more what I was thinking, but I'm sure I'll get used to it. It's just something that feels a little weird. I'm also afraid of the fact that it's probably going to be played for cheap items most of the time, which stuff like Pick-a-Pair has been dumped to at this point.
Well, I think a lot of the fee games have some of the less expensive prizes because you don't have to guess the actual price of something. And I think a lot of that isn't necessarily a budget saving maneuver. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it doesn't look good if people continuously overprice the value of something and then they find out it's much cheaper than they initially thought. I think there's a connotation there where if you're watching the show and somebody thinks let's go with a Chevy Spark. Let's say someone thinks a Chevy Spark is $20,000, which I'm pretty sure has happened on the show before, and then it's actually like $13,000 or $14,000. Does that really make the Chevy Spark look all that good if someone thinks it's more expensive than it actually is? I think that the advertisers don't like that as much. So when you have the prize packages that aren't worth as much, that's why they reveal the actual retail price, and you're not trying to guess the price of it, but rather it's given to you and it's immaterial to the gameplay.
I think in general we were probably due for a new fee game anyway because
we just had Time is Money.
This is true, but I mean I think in general even before Time is Money, what do we have? We had like the big stuff like Pay the Rent, Rat Race, Double Cross, Do the Math, that kind of thing. I think the idea of a simple fee game once in a while, it helps keep the flow going. It just doesn't making sure it's like oversaturated with like quote unquote big games.
And they have gone on record in saying that they want quicker games. I think they certainly succeeded. I mean, the game moves quickly. It is a one decision game, but it doesn't feel like a one decision game because there's so much going on. There's the transfer of the coin, there's putting it in the slot, there's the reveal of the vending machine, there's the decision, there's 3 separate reveals. In the same way, it's like Most Expensive or Easy as 1, 2, 3, where one decision has to be made and then they have the different reveals. That being said, I don't think we're going to see Most Expensive and Vendo Price on the same show. I don't think we're going to see One Wrong Price and Vendo Price on the same show. I think it's another instance of that style of quicker game, which they honestly need more quickies in that regard. They have enough 2-prize games to fill the rotation. They added Double Cross, they added Do the Math, that's fine. In terms of a pricing game only for 1 prize, or 2 like a sauna and a bike that they wedge together like they do all the time, that is something that they didn't really have very many of, or something that had 3 choices. You make 1 choice, and then there's a reveal. You have Most Expensive, Easy as 1, 2, 3, One Wrong Price. They could have used another one, and I'm happy that they went with it. So I approve of Vendo Price. While I disagree with minute details of the execution, the penny ante sound being for the most expensive instead of the least expensive, and probably looking into how Drew introduces the game. I mean, granted, that might have been just ad-lib. They might have been just like, come up with something. But overall, in terms of gameplay and necessity on the show, I give it a thumbs up. What do you guys think?
I'm thumbs up as well. And I think in general, my thought for like thumbs up, thumbs down is overall how it works as a game rather than like just the story or just kind of the minute details we're talking about. And because it fills the role we're talking about, because it goes in a unique direction with the multiplication and the multiple grocery products, I think it's a welcome addition. I give it a thumbs up personally.
Yeah, I'm with Jordan. Thumbs up.
I guess I'm going to be the Scrooge here. I'm not going to say thumbs down, but I'm going to be like kind of mixed sideways kind of thumbs.
Parallel thumbs.
I think it's going to take a while to grow on me. I mean, I have not been a big fan of Time is Money either, but I mean, Time is Money is definitely growing on me. I just have problems with that game as well. But anyway.
But I think that if they introduce... I know a lot of people don't like some of the quicker games, but I feel like if they introduce elements to the quicker games like we see with Vendo Price, I think it has a lot of potential to change up the variety of games that they offer each day.
I think so. I'm just curious whether... I guess I'm just thinking how that thought would translate into games besides quickies, but I guess that's another talk for another time.
It is. And I think that's going to about wrap it up. So do any of you have any final thoughts before we conclude this pilot episode of CNAOS? Not something I'm used to saying yet.
CNAOS. No. No, I mean, I guess my thoughts are interesting premiere week, whether or not we like totally loved it or not. It's a very interesting idea, and curious to see whether they do any like other weird stuff with specials this year, or whether they go to to sort of the similar stuff they've been doing like the past 2 or 3.
Honestly, this week was fun. At least the first 2 shows were for sure. I mean, I've had problems with various abilities to watch the show this week, but one thing I wish they did for 90s with Cover Up is if they're going to hint to all these former games, bring one of them back. Bring Split Decision back or something. Because obviously you still care about them enough to mention them at all.
Nick, do you have anything to add?
Nope.
That's why you're the quiet one.
Yeah.
Because everyone loves the quiet one on an audio recording.
His thoughts are loud.
I will say that the debut episode of the season, 70s Week, got me incredibly hyped for the rest of the week. I wanted to see what they did next. Maybe in retrospect, start with the 2010s and work our way back to the 70s and build up and build up and build up to this grand denouement of everything being different to the 70s. But you can also understand that they wanted to start with a bang because a lot of people are going to be tuning in because the show hadn't had a new episode in a while. But I do appreciate that while some of the aesthetics weren't as drastically different on the 90s and 2000s, I will commend the show for sticking with the theme the entire week and not straying from it. They honored each decade with pretty much equal time in the best way that they could. I felt that the fashion choices were good. All the models wore decade-appropriate clothing. The audiences wore decades-appropriate clothing, even though a lot of that was probably provided for them. I felt that everything worked really well, and I commend them for doing it, and I can't wait to see what happens next week, even though it's just going to be a regular week. I like it, and bring on more Price is Right.
Yeah, this should be an interesting season. We'll see how it goes.
All right, and that's going to wrap things up. Again, thanks for listening to this episode of Contestants Not Appearing on Stage, and we will see you next time. Till then, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to Contestants Not Appearing on Stage, part of the Torgo Entertainment Network. For more episodes of Contestants Not Appearing on Stage, check us out on YouTube or online at CNAOScast.net.